The war in Ukraine will rewrite all military textbooks. Earlier I emphasized that the war in Ukraine is unique and there has never been such a war in modern history. Unique operations, unique decisions and unique situations. There are many examples of this. Some of them. For example, when an aggressor country with a fleet loses a naval battle to a country without a fleet. I can only remember the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, when the Jews sank 2 Egyptian warships without having their own fleet. Or the aggressor country, which has the most dangerous and numerous airborne component, out of more than 30 airborne operations, was able to carry out successfully only 1. But today I would like to talk about defense and how Ukraine has destroyed hardened stereotypes about defense. As you know, such a stereotype includes the statement that to break through the defense you need a quantitative advantage of 3 times or even more than the forces holding the defense. In a sense, in 2022, the Ukrainian defense forces chose exactly this tactic. They were able to stop the advance of the Russian troops by conducting exclusively defensive activities in the first weeks of the invasion, and with the numerical and technological superiority of the enemy, they not only stopped it, but also bled it out and threw it off. In turn, the current operation in Zaporizhia region completely destroys this stereotype. The southern direction, namely Zaporizhia region, is held by the Russian group of troops east. What is its potential? Up to 105,000 personnel. Up to 470 tanks, which is only 33% of the required standard equipment. Up to 1,410 armored fighting vehicles, or 32% of the standard equipment. Up to 720 artillery pieces, or 48% of barrel artillery. 230 MLRS, or 15%. I did not just point out the shortfall in the standard equipment, but I'll talk about that later. All this mass I note, without taking into account the group of troops Dnepr, holding the left bank of the Kherson region, opposes in defense, on carefully prepared lines of defense, the Ukrainian forces 3 times smaller both in terms of personnel and a number of other, and yet they are still defeated. The first line of defense, the most difficult and the most extreme, the Ukrainian defense forces have already broken through. The Russian forces have hastily activated reserves, started pulling in additional units, and are unpacking strategic reserves. And yet, the AFU is advancing daily, pushing back the enemy. Now, as for the standard equipment. These indicators, even with a seemingly catastrophic shortage, which is comparable to the loss of combat capability, are relatively sufficient for defense. But it is the word relatively that is important. The Russian command understood that the Zaporizhia region could become the main theater of military operations, and therefore feverishly prepared defense lines, but fully staff the group of troops could not. And why? Because the Russian military-industrial complex has no such capability. For example, now, in the active phase of combat operations, they can hardly make 50% of compensation for artillery losses. They can compensate up to 20% to 30% of air defense losses per month, not to mention the full staffing of units, especially newly formed ones. This proves once again that the Russian army has lost its offensive potential and can perform defense functions rather mediocrely. Therefore, when I keep hearing or reading from someone about a large-scale Russian offensive being prepared, I can only throw up my hands. Otherwise, the Ukrainian army has shattered yet another stereotype about Russia's military capabilities. Having more than triple superiority in defense in almost all indicators and impassable defense lines, the Russian army is not able to hold back the offensive of the Ukrainian defense forces and will not be able to do so in the future. And this operation will go down in the textbooks.